This is a labor story that I think is flying under the radar, but I thought it tied in very well with a lot of what's going on right now. We have Davos promoting its idea of a carbon neutral future. And you've got the German farmers and French farmers protesting in solidarity with them against new policies that are really designed to make the kind of farming they do less profitable. And anyone who speaks out against it is going to be called a right-winger.
Right.
They're going to be called fascist, Nazi adjacent. But let's see why really a lot of working people wind up having issues with these policies.
Wait,
let's see how this plays out on the ground. So here we go. From Rishi Sunak, a big day for UK Steel. We've agreed a joint $1 billion investment with Tata Steel to save thousands of British jobs and secure the future of the steel industry in Wales. This follows the £4 billion investment we secured from Tata companies in July to create 4,000 jobs. Now, this is not that long ago. This is September 15th, 2023. This is about 5 months ago. Tata Steel to shut down Port Talbot blast furnaces, putting 3,000 jobs at risk. The owners...
Wait, you see that? UK is the only country...
We'll get to that. Yeah. The owners of Port Talbot Steelworks have rejected a trade union plan designed to keep its blast furnaces running, putting nearly 3,000 jobs at risk and leaving the UK on course to become the only major economy unable to make steel from scratch.
You did it.
Rather ironic from the country once known for British steel. In what one union said would be a crushing blow to workers in UK steelmaking, Port Talbot's parent company, the Indian-owned Tata Steel, told workers' representatives that it could no longer afford to continue production at the loss-making plant in South Wales while it completed a 4-year transition plan to greener production.
Nice.
The company, which is getting £500 million from the government to help with that plan, broke the news during a summit at the 5-star St. James Court Hotel in London, which is owned by the Tata Group. I guess the hotels are doing better. The shadow business secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, lashed out at the government for providing Tata with funds to pay for its green transition plans without securing a guarantee on jobs. He said the government's strategy was, quote, £500 million for 3,000 job losses. Under the Tata plan, which is expected to be announced formally on Friday, Port Talbot's blast furnaces will shut down while the company builds electric arc furnaces, which make steel from recycled scrap, a greener and cheaper process. The Guardian understands that about 200 jobs could be saved under a proposal to keep some of the site's mills open to roll steel slab. But the decision is a huge blow for a town where the local economy is so heavily dependent on a single factory. The community and GMB unions had put forward a staggered transition plan designed to provide immediate protection for workers. Under their proposals, the blast furnaces would have remained open during the transition, with at least one continuing to operate until 2032. But at a meeting in London on Thursday, Tata Steel is understood to have told union representatives that the proposal was unaffordable given Port Talbot's losses estimated at £1 million a day. The UK's only other blast furnaces at Scunthorpe are also slated for shutdown during a similar, potentially lengthy transition process to electric arc furnaces. That would leave the UK as the only G20 country that cannot make steel from raw materials. Shutting down Port Talbot's 2 blast furnaces would mark the latest grim milestone in a decades-long decline that has seen production fall from 25 million tons in 1971 to 6 million tons, while employment in the sector has slumped from 250,000 to just under 34,000. The industry trade body UK Steel said earlier this year that 2024 was a crossroads for the British steel industry, at which it could either enjoy a renaissance or continue in managed decline. Once up and running, this is the best part. Once up and running, new electric arc furnaces will be capable of replicating some of the higher quality grades produced by blast furnaces, typically for use in the automotive industry and industrial processes such as food and drinks canning, but making higher grades of steel that way is more difficult, meaning the UK could also lose out on the ability to make some products, relying instead on imports.
This is to make them Brenter. From their
yeah,
Brexit.
this sounds like a great deal for the British people.
So they're going to be dependent on other countries. Right. They can't do their Brexit thing that they never did, I guess.
A government spokesperson said, quote, "We are determined to secure a sustainable and competitive future for the UK steel sector, which is why we have committed £500 million of UK government support that will transform the site and protect thousands of jobs, both in Port Talbot and throughout the supply chain." So this is from David Osland. Tata Steel bosses asked for and got a £500 million state subsidy to make 3,000 workers redundant. That's the superior efficiency of the private sector for you.
Yeah, Rick Overton just texted me that Tata means goodbye. So anyways, Tata.
Yeah, Tata jobs. John Jones. In Britain, no group has been more savagely betrayed than the manufacturing industrial working class. Same in America, buddy. Since 1979, UK governments of both parties have let that capacity be either closed or sold off to foreign owners who care little for Britain. From Simru, Wales. Tata Steel doesn't care about Welsh steelworkers. If Tory Thatcher hadn't privatized steel, it would be publicly owned. Time to buy out Port Talbot Steelworks for public ownership to protect steelmaking in Wales. If Wales were independent, it would never have been privatized. Freedom!
You think Lotus Eaters will pick this one up?
They need Mel Gibson in blue face paint. Just in. Tata Steel are set to shut their blast furnaces at Port Talbot with 3,000 jobs gone across the UK. And is this what net zero looks like? Net zero jobs.
Yes. EU. Back to the EU.
And but everybody who's against these changes is an ist and a phobe. Because and you'll hear all of that lecturing coming from coastal elites who don't have jobs like this. They don't know anybody with jobs like this. And they don't give a shit about people with jobs like this.
I have a buddy who's a real rich guy that he got rich selling domain names back in the day, like real estate.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of people made a lot of money off that.
I know.
He goes, I don't think I'm worried about America. I said, then he transitioned into sending American jobs to other countries. You know, Americans are lazy. He goes, I don't care about that. I'm a global citizen.
That's it. That's how these people think.
Or think globally. When you have money, I'm a citizen of the world. I don't care. Nationalism is kind of racist, really, when you think about it.
Well, that's just it. I mean, they want to impose that ethos on the world population, even though it doesn't prove any material benefit to most of the world population. And that's why it becomes a very difficult sell when the rubber hits the road. You know, all of this priming, you know, in the, 70s, 80s, and 90s about the green movement and anti-pollution and conservation, right? I mean, certain people bought it, certain people didn't, but it was all well and good until it came time to actually make the transition, which is going to cost a lot of people their livelihoods. And now you're at that sort of breaking point. I mean, we've actually been here for quite a while. This is exactly how Brexit happened. It's exactly how a guy like Trump won here. When you just see the just open disregard for the consequences of these decisions on the working class populations of your state. Obviously their move is to brand anyone who has a problem with this as sort of retrograde or unscientific or, Luddite, right? But
racist.
that's just not going to hold. Right. And it can't hold. And at the end of the day, their case was not made strongly to the point where it can sustain this quote unquote transition, because there are too many people who fall through the cracks. And, once too many people fall through the cracks, the center can no longer hold. And, they got a mulligan with COVID. That's how Biden was able to barely eke out a victory. But that wouldn't have happened absent a once-in-a-century pandemic. And unless this disease X is coming sooner than later, they're not going to have that to save their ass this time, which is why Biden's prospects are looking increasingly dim. But yeah, it's all about just priming people for their own demise, right? You're basically training people to accept their own sort of downfall. That's largely what Davos is there for, right? It's there to explain to people how this quote transition into a lower quality of life is actually virtuous and for your own good.
Well, you're guilty. You're born. It's an old religious trick of you're guilty of things that before you were even born, and you got to atone for it. And
yeah. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that so many of these ideas have gained currency at a moment when you have record high numbers of people who are atheists.
Yeah,
it's a substitute. Right. It's a substitute for religion. People feel a need to have rules and precepts and moral guidance. And if you don't get it in one form, they'll create it in another form. And the religion of coastal elites in this, let's face it, that's mostly who we're talking about, is to signal virtue around climate and tolerance. And this is the way they avoid talking about the economic consequences of the decisions that they're making. It's not set aside. I know we have people who litigate climate change and the human causing. Set that aside. You can, as you see here, they took 500 million pounds and gave it to this company. And the union had a proposal for how you would do this. If I'm understanding correctly, they didn't argue not to do this transition. They presented a way to do it that would not throw all these people out of work. And they chose to do it the other way. And it's always going to fall on the workers. Why aren't they saying, you know what? We have people running around with the personal wealth of a country. Why don't we tax these people and put that money into these workers and their communities? They're not going to do that. And as Keaton often points out, a lot of people like to talk about the failures of communism. And hey, I talk about that. Anyone who watches our show knows I'm not very supportive of that for other reasons. But they never want to talk about the failures of capitalism. Isn't this a failure of capitalism?
Yeah, are we in success right now? Is that what this is?
Right.
By the way, net zero, that's Bill Gates. Net zero, made up by Bill Gates.
Right. Well, as with many other things. Marx, who I believe got a lot of things wrong. He got one thing right. That late stage capitalism, you would see capital eat the state. Yep. That with nothing left to loot in the society, it would loot the treasury of the government. So that's what you're seeing with the government paying a steelworks to throw these people out of work. They're taking the people's tax money to take away their jobs. Now, this is what Marx would say. Yeah. Right, exactly. This is what Marx said would happen in the late stages of capitalism. And here we are. And this is in a country that relative to us has some elements of democratic socialism, and their state is still being devoured by capital. Keaton?
Well, there's no self-regulating mechanism within capitalism to actually stop that. Any measure you take to counter that is by definition anti-capitalist, because you are pulling back on a system that is built on exponential multiplication. right? There is no check. There is no emergency exit switch within that system. Capitalism is built on exponential growth. It only gets faster as it goes along. There's nothing in it to slow it down except a democratic check on it, which some call socialism. I don't really care what you call it, but it clearly needs a democratic check. And as for the sort of green religion, that's sort of a false religion pushed by the wealthy because their actual only religion is money. There are ways to help the environment. There are ways to make Earth a more habitable place for human beings. But many of those would cost rich people money. Perfect example. Okay. We don't have to talk about all this innovation and, we're going to do hybrid cars and, EVs and reusable bags. How about just a 4-day work week? How about a 4-day work week? Anybody who lives in or around a major city will tell you if you had one fewer day of rush hour in New York or Los Angeles, you would see air quality increase dramatically. We know this because one effect of the COVID lockdowns is you saw massive levels of environmental healing.
Yep.
Just
very quickly
being left the fuck alone for 7 weeks. 7 weeks we saw vegetation and fish return to Venice. Yep. We saw the ozone actually start to heal. We saw stunning crystal clear views of the Manhattan skyline from miles away. People who could never see it before all of a sudden could see it. Now, I'm not saying we all locked down again for that reason, but I'm saying, what about a 4-day work week?
How about working from home?
That would help the world out quite a bit. But you know what? That would cost the oligarchs something. It would cost the 1% something because they wouldn't have their ants hustling to make them money that 5th day. And so they won't do that. So instead, they'll impose these bullshit, reusable bags, 5 cents for a paper bag, no handles on the fucking bags, EV, cars, and tax breaks for stores that make a parking spot for an EV. It's all just masturbation. Right. If they really wanted to help the environment, there are ways to do that. That are less imposing on people's lives, but that would cost not the average person money. It would cost the bosses money.
Exactly. We were talking about that the other day when Jimmy was in the studio. Most of this recycling is bullshit. Most of all this stuff you're sorting out, which apparently here, I'm shocked they don't find you. Like in New York, this is a big part of a super's job. On garbage day, Jimmy, they got to separate the plastics and the cardboard, and they'll give you a ticket for that.
Particularly well run.
And most, I guess they can't even manage that. But they'll give you a big fine, and most plastic is not recyclable because it's not compatible. Like one kind of plastic is not like another kind of plastic. It's a different composition.
It's not cost effective is what it is.
It's not. You'd have to hire people to really figure out the chemical composition. So it's busy work. It's a waste of time. Like, how do you not see these Davos initiatives, which never go after the consumption of the rich, which is the majority of the consumption? How do you see it as anything other than convincing people that it's their religious duty to accept a lower standard of living while theirs remains the same?
Right.
All right. And I think on that cheery note, we're going to wish you a happy weekend. We'll get to it. I'm going to be leaving for a few days. I will be back for the live show on the 27th. Then I will be in the studio, sometimes hosting, sometimes sitting in until February 9th. Kurt, where are you going to be?
Nashville Zanies, 26th through 28th. I'm
going back? Weren't you just there?
Dallas,
just
I was just in.
Oh, okay.
Now I'm going to Nashville Zanies.
All right. What dates?
26th through 28th, but go to Kurt Metzger Comedy on Instagram, and my dates are up there, and go get a ticket and come out. That's a good one. All right,
you hear that? Go to Kurt Metzger Comedy. He'll be in Nashville, 26th, 28th, cutting his country album, Zanies.
I'll be doing my country album, finally.
Finally. Hey, man, it's never too late. Keaton, where can they find you?
Do Dissidents, YouTube, and Rumble. And tomorrow night, I'll be in the parking lot of the SBNU Arena in Manchester, New Hampshire, mixing it up with the Deplorables. I'll be shit-talking with the Trumpers on their way into the rally as part of our election coverage. So come on out and hang out in 8-degree weather with me and all the MAGA faithful.
while I'm down in NOLA eating some king cake. I will be in NOLA this week. I will not be appearing at a comedy club, though. Everyone, I just want to say thank you. The Jimmy audience has been so welcoming and supportive, and I look forward to seeing you all again.
Come see us do a live stand-up show. We'll be in Venice, California, Palmdale, California, Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Boston, Massachusetts, and we're going to Europe. Do you live in Europe? We're going to be there. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.